The vast sprawling plains of the Utah desert stretched as far as the eye could see. Dotted with red cliffs, dry riverbeds, and the occasional twisted tree, it was a place of isolation, where the wind carried ancient whispers and the land held untold secrets. John Davis had lived on his family's ranch his entire life, just like his father before him and his father's father before that. Generations of Davis men had tended the land, raising cattle and surviving the harsh desert conditions. But there was something different about this year. The ranch had become unusually quiet. Livestock had started disappearing, cattle mostly, vanishing in the dead of night without a trace. At first, John thought it was coyotes or rustlers, but the signs were all wrong. No tracks, no blood, no signs of struggle. It was as if the animals had simply been plucked from existence. And then there were the strange howls, unnatural sounds that echoed across the plains at night, sending chills down the spine of anyone unlucky enough to hear them. John's ranch hand, Miguel, a local Navajo man, had warned him. "You should leave this land," he said one morning after they discovered a mutilated cow on the outskirts of the property. "There's something ancient out there, something evil. My grandfather told me stories about this land. The Skinwalkers roam here." John scoffed at the idea, brushing it off as superstitious nonsense. Skinwalkers were legends, stories meant to scare children, but even so, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in his bones. Something was out there, watching, waiting. That night, the wind howled louder than usual, rattling the windows of the ranch house. John sat in the dark, staring out into the pitch-black desert. He could feel it, a presence, something unseen moving just beyond the reach of his headlights. The cattle were restless in their pens, their low, anxious moans filling the air. He grabbed his rifle and headed out, his boots crunching against the dry earth. The stars above were bright, but they offered little comfort. The desert at night was a different world, vast, cold, and unforgiving. As John neared the fence, he saw something in the distance. It was low to the ground, moving slowly, almost like a coyote. But this was no coyote. As he raised his rifle to get a better look, the thing stood up. It was a man, or at least it resembled a man. It was hunched, its limbs long and gaunt, with skin stretched tight over its bones. The figure turned its head toward John, and in the moonlight he saw its eyes, glowing yellow eyes that burned with an unnatural light. The creature let out a low, guttural growl, and then it ran, disappearing into the night faster than anything John had ever seen. He stood there, frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed. The next few nights were worse. The howling grew louder, more frequent, and always seemed to be closer. John started losing sleep, his mind filled with images of the creature, that thing with glowing eyes. He found more mutilated cattle, their bodies twisted and broken in ways that made no sense. Miguel refused to come to work, leaving John alone to deal with the ranch and its growing problems. One night, John decided to set a trap. He positioned himself in the barn, rifle ready, determined to put an end to whatever was tormenting his ranch. Hours passed in silence, the only sound the occasional shuffle of the cattle. Then, just after midnight, he heard it, a soft, almost human-like whisper carried on the wind. "John," he froze. The voice was distant but unmistakable. It was his wife's voice, though she had died 3 years ago. "John, come outside." His heart pounded in his chest. It was impossible. He stood up, rifle in hand, and cautiously made his way to the barn door. As he stepped outside, the voice called again, closer this time. "John!" His hands trembled. The wind picked up, swirling dust around him as he walked into the darkness. And then he saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the field. At first he thought it was his wife. The figure wore her clothes, her favorite dress, her long hair flowing in the wind. But then he noticed the eyes, those same glowing yellow eyes. The creature's face twisted into a grotesque smile, and John felt his blood turn to ice. This was no human, no ghost. This was something ancient, something evil. John raised his rifle and fired. The bullet struck the creature, but instead of falling, it let out a high-pitched, inhuman screech and dropped to all fours, running into the night like a wild animal. John chased after it, determined to end this nightmare once and for all. He followed the creature deep into the desert, where the land became jagged and broken, filled with canyons and cliffs. The wind roared around him, carrying whispers and strange noises. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, and the night seemed alive with malevolent energy. He finally came to a stop when he reached an ancient rock formation, where he saw it. Beneath the shadow of a towering stone, the creature stood, now fully transformed. It was no longer wearing the form of his wife. Its body was gaunt, covered in matted fur with long, twisted limbs. Its face was a hideous mix of human and animal features, with large, sharp teeth gleaming in the moonlight. It growled, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through John's chest. "You should not have come here." The creature's voice was guttural, almost like a growl, yet somehow it was still speaking English. John aimed his rifle, his hands shaking. "What are you?" The Skinwalker tilted its head, its yellow eyes gleaming with malice. "I am what you fear, what you've been warned about. This land is mine. You are trespassing." John fired again, but the bullet seemed to have no effect. The creature lunged at him, moving faster than he could react. It knocked the rifle from his hands and pinned him to the ground, its face inches from his own. Its breath was hot, rancid, and its eyes seemed to bore into his soul. "You cannot kill me, rancher," it hissed. "I am many. I am endless." John struggled, but the creature's grip was like iron. Just as he thought it was the end, the Skinwalker paused, its head snapping to the side as if hearing something in the distance. It growled, low and angry, before releasing him and disappearing into the night, leaving John gasping for air. John stumbled back to the ranch at dawn, exhausted and terrified. He knew now that this was no ordinary creature, and there was no fighting it. Miguel was right. The land was cursed. The Skinwalker would continue its torment, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He packed what he could, grabbed the remaining cattle, and left the ranch. As he drove away, he could feel its eyes on him, watching from the shadows of the desert, waiting. He never returned to that land. He knew the Skinwalker was still out there, lurking in the wilderness, waiting for the next trespasser to cross its path, and the legend lived on.